Hi, how are you, dears? I'm afraid that I'm the skunk at this particular. Sorry about my stutter. This particular picnic, because I'm not favorably disposed towards behavioral economics, neuroeconomics, happiness studies, the nudge, incentivizing people to do things, and the rest. It seems to me that behaviorism, which in fact has been the calling card of economics since really the 1930s, is a dramatic confinement of economics to what parts of our world people think can be quantified. But I'm here to argue that, for example, happiness is not something that can be quantified. It's like trying to quantify your temperature and mine. We're the society that we're speaking about by taking your temperature in Fahrenheit at 98.6 and mine in Celsius at 37.2, and then concluding that the average temperature in the room with you and me is now, let's see, 67.9 degrees. That's what happiness studies do. If we're interested in the happiness of Japan versus the United States, we're essentially adding up the highly individual scales that each person has for happiness and pretending that the aggregate says something about the society. And I think this feature of quantifying things that are questionably quantified. Now, I'm a quantitative economic historian and economist, but I draw the line at quantifying things that can't be quantified. I propose instead a wider economic science, which I call humanomics. Economics, as you mentioned, with the humans left in. Now, Adam Smith, I always cross myself when I mention Adam Smith, actually, in the 18th century, did humanomics. He was a philosopher. He was a widely cultivated man. But then economics forgot that it's a human science. Facts are nice, but as the previous speaker said, feelings are crucial too, and feelings are to be discovered in what we say, how we talk. As was mentioned by the host, I've argued that about 1/4 of national income is earned through sweet talk, especially supervisors and managers, but obviously also in advertising and in sales. 1/4, actually 1/4 of labor income, and then about the same percentage of the whole of national income is talk. And talk in humans, it's our main thing. That's what we're engaged in right now. Is The is essentially creative. It's not routine. It's not reducible to marginal cost and marginal utility. Ideas which I love and have taught at the University of Chicago and elsewhere. I love economics. I love everything it does, but I want to make it go further and not in the direction that behavioral economics is urging. That indeed, that behavioral economics is an old way, and not, I think, a very satisfactory way of doing economics. I've made the case in a short book. It's very short, so you haven't got any excuse. That was just published. Humanomics, a new and old way of doing economic science. I was thrilled to see a rave review of the book a couple of weeks ago in the Financial Times. The kind of rave that your mom would like you to get. The burden of humanomics, to come at it another way, is that speech and especially ideas matter. I've argued in this humanomics book and in some others that, for example, now hear this, the 3,000% increase in real income per head for the poor among us since 1800. Hear that, 3,000%, a great enrichment, did not come from trade or from investment or from banking or from any of the usual explanations, but came in fact from, and this is in a way completely obvious, from new ideas. And those new ideas, that ability to have a go, as English says, was made possible by the freedoms first theorized in a large way by Hume and Adam Smith in Scotland in the 18th century. In other words, it's invention, it's new ideas in organization, such as the modern university, or ideas such as obvious ones like the steam engine, and not so obvious but small ones like cardboard. Imagine our world, especially under COVID, without cardboard boxes to send things to our house. It's ideas that made us rich, and it's the freeing up of the ideas. Now, we speak of supply chains all the time, and these of course have been bombed by COVID. But anyone in the economic world knows, except for the theorists in economics, knows that supply chains change constantly. There are substitutes for things, as economists have been saying for a long time, such as Zoom as a substitute for face-to-face encounters. But above all, what's made us rich and to not necessarily happy, but has made us rich, is invention, Zoom itself. for example. In other words, you can't rely on last year's routines. That's what we mean by supply chain if you're going to succeed. And to come back to this central notion of my talk, this humanomics, a great many of the routines in economic science are equally as unreliable as last year's supply chain. For example, this is a strange one that I think lots of you are probably involved in. In economics and in marketing and in lots of other fields, there's a gross misuse of tests of statistical significance, so-called R-squares, correlations, fit to express it generally. For 100 years, advanced applied and theoretical statisticians have been complaining about the mechanical use. Something's important. Many economists and psychologists believe if it's statistically significant. And that's wrong. And it's been known to be wrong for 100 years. And yet we go on. If we were to abandon this technique and focus in instead of what you might call oomph, that is how much one variable affects another, not whether it fits a straight line well, which is what statistical significance is, the economics and marketing and so on would be radically changed. In my own field of economic history, I look for oomph. I look for how much ideas mattered in the great enrichment and how much investment didn't matter. If we were to adopt humanomics, which in a way is just common sense studying all the evidence and not just what we think of as the easy evidence, the world and our sciences and our occupations would be enriched and saved. So, thank you very much.
Deirdre, fantastic to see you. We last met, I think, on the streets of Kilkenny in 2017, if I'm right. And I can also promise that your Cadbury's Whole Nut, which is Deirdre's rider for giving the talk,
yes,
is on its way. Daniel Kahneman's rider is actually, by the way, for Cafe Nero coffee. And we promised him huge sacks of the stuff, only to discover that the importation of coffee into the United States is almost unfeasibly difficult. So I'm going to have to wait for El Chapo to get released from jail before I can actually get the stuff. If anybody wants to volunteer as a mule on a transatlantic flight, I'm intrigued to know. Funnily enough, although I'd think of myself in the behavioural economics realm, I describe myself as a behavioural economics impresario, I'm not sure we're all that different, because one of the things I'd say is that the value of ideation, imagination combined with persuasion is fundamental to innovation. It's not enough to invent something. You have to invent it and present it in such a way that people feel comfortable buying it from someone they can trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to inspire your workers, and you have to persuade your bankers, and you have to persuade the, alas, these days, the state's regulatory bodies. So, you know, sweet talk is the key. And sweet talk is deeply unpredictable and creative.
So this is fascinating. The other point you make is, by the way, we should have next year come back, because we're going to have a whole new, we're going to have a whole session on p-values, because I'm uncomfortable with the whole thing as well.
I'm your girl. I'm your girl.
Right, you're back. Because I know there was a disagreement between Seeley Gossett, the guy who worked for Guinness, and I think it was R.A. Fisher. And one of them was kind of
It
academic
was.
statistician, and the other one was a business statistician. He worked for Guinness, in fact, if
That's
I'm right.
He did indeed. Yep.
And he said, no, the
He
p-value.
became eventually.
Carry on.
Became eventually the head brewer.
Now, the interesting thing is, he said, when you want to know the reliability of a statistical value, you want to know what consequences would result from acting on the decision. It's not enough simply to look at a degree of confidence. You have to have a look at a degree of consequence from any decision, and the asymmetry of making a mistake in one direction or the other. So that, by the way, is a huge debate, which I think we'll have to reserve to next year. On the value of ideas, you're very, very close to Paul Romer, I guess, who would you...
Yeah, but you know... No. Paul, in fact, was an undergraduate student of mine at the University of Chicago, and he's mentioned ideas. But Paul is an economist, again, like me, right down to his patent leather shoes, and he hasn't extended himself to the humanities. And I don't think we can do without philosophy, history, gossip, film, rock music, humor in understanding how people act and how to sweet talk them. So I think Paul has kind of modeled it a little bit, but he hasn't really gotten down to the hard science here. I don't think the word science applies only to physics and biology. Kind of like Paul.
Okay, this is fantastic. So the absolute telegraph thought here is that the very activities that we tend to see of as wasteful or incidental to the efficiency maximization game of what economists have become preoccupied with is actually the main game. In a sense, the huge increase in wealth that happened at the beginning of the 19th century was a psychological phenomenon and a verbal phenomenon, a linguistic phenomenon, far more than it was down to anything kind of banausic and physical. Well, I work in an advertising agency. It's music to my ears. So, Deirdre, see you next year. See you at Kilkenomics, which is by the way, a festival of comedy and economics in Kilkenny, Ireland, held in November and hosted by the wonderful David McWilliams, whom we both know. Deirdre, thank you enormously. It's an absolute joy. Chocolate on the way. Tickets to Lord's on the way. An eccentric request from an American, but we'll do our best.
To Lord's.
Okay.
And, yes. Okay, my love.
Thank you so much.